The From Busy to Rich podcast helps financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage, increase profitability, and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast, where we help financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage to increase profitability and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice. Wes, it's great to see you today. How are you doing, sir?
Fabulous, Justin. How you doing?
I am really excited about today's topic and our guest. I won't give away any of the trade secrets before we dive into it, but it's one I think that all of our viewers and listeners are going to really enjoy because it's central to so much what we do and it's such an untapped area. So with that, why don't you introduce our guest and let's dive in.
Yeah, well, I'm always excited to have any conversations I can with my friend Mike Jesowsheck. And for those of you, many of you listener base, you're going to know Mike already because you listen to his podcast. And if you've been through Transform, you've heard Mike several times. But just a wealth of knowledge in the tax space where we're gonna dance around today. Mike, man, thanks for being on the show. And I would love it if you would spend a little bit of time, for those that may not have the privilege of knowing you yet, to talk just about the cool stuff you guys do, about you a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Wes, thanks for having me. And yeah, I kind of took an interesting journey in my career. Been an entrepreneur since the age of 14. And so have seen kind of all sorts of sides of the business, have had a couple of exits. But I started my career in an online marketing industry. And so weird that an online marketer is here now talking about taxes. But I went to school for accounting and CPA as my backup plan if this whole marketing thing didn't work. And in 2013, the company that we were at was really good at, every partner was really good at doing certain things, but we're starting to clash as saying, like, we're trying to pull one company into 7 different directions. And so in 2013, we decided to break up, and that was my opportunity to start an accounting firm that focused on this specific industry that I was working in. And in 2013, I started an accounting firm, completely virtual, digital-based accounting firm, which now is very common. But back in 2013, that wasn't as common. But the industry I came from, everyone was younger generation, everyone was working from home, so it was very natural to kind of step into those shoes. And started that journey in the accounting firm and started to realize that there's a lot of opportunity or missed opportunities in tax that also business owners are struggling to find out what opportunities are there. And their CPAs sometimes aren't helping them. And then when their CPA they do come up with a strategy, their CPA kind of says things that they don't understand and they're just getting kind of pushed around. And so I saw a huge gap in this tax planning piece and just really fell in love with learning about tax strategy, tax law, and in how it can be applicable to business owners. And so about 8 years ago, started a podcast, really breaking down every week a tax strategy, what people need to know about it, how to implement it, what's the important things about it, and fell in love talking to tax strategy at a high level. And so in 2021, sold the majority stake in my firm to go 100% on our podcast and YouTube and content creation piece. And then 2 years ago, started a software called TaxHelm. And that TaxHelm software, really what we do is intentions is to help business owners understand what strategies are available to them, walk them through the actual step-by-step implementation of them, and then also be that third party there that's gives them unlimited access to us for questions that arise along the way. So nowadays, my time is spent on podcasting, content creation, just getting the word out to entrepreneurs of what strategies are available to them, and then as well as building and kind of continuing to grow our software business.
I love it, Mike. And I've personally benefited from being first just a listener of your podcast and then getting to work with you a little more in depth after that. And I think one of the things you and I have talked about that I think would be a great way to dive into on this, because you get to see a lot of different practices out there, is what I think is one of the greatest untapped opportunities in the holistic fee-based financial planning industry. And that is in this area of tax intelligence, because most advisors, their level of tax intelligence that they know is, I know a tax strategy if it means I get to manage some money or place a product. But outside of that, not a lot of effort and energy is given to understanding that there are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of combinations of ways to legally repurpose money that's unnecessarily going away to the IRS back to the client's retained earnings. And if your goal in your business or your win is to help the client increase their profitability and their quality of life, you will begin to hunt these things out. But I'd love your observations as you've seen a lot of financial advisors and a lot of different practices, your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, it's funny because I agree 100% with you. The financial advisor is in a great spot to do it. And the fact is that nobody is doing tax planning. You typically would think a CPA is the person that should be
Yeah.
doing tax planning. But if you look and you canvas out there all the CPAs in the country, I would guess that 80% of them, if not much higher than that, don't do any tax planning with their clients.
Yeah.
And with the tax planning they do is, here's what you should pay in estimated taxes. Go make that payment, or let's fund a retirement account right before the tax deadline just to get some, retirement contributions. It's stuff like that where we're not deep diving into it.
Yeah.
And I have a theory on why people, and this is more on the CPA side. And so that's why I think I love what you guys are doing, because on the advisor side, there isn't as big of an excuse for that. But I think the reason on the CPA side is that they're just so bogged down with tax prep and filing that they don't have time to step away and help their clients with the planning piece.
Yeah.
And CPAs, I think, traditionally are afraid to charge people. And so they think that their clients think that an agreement with their CPA means you're filing my taxes and you're supposed to be helping me plan on how to lower that tax liability, when that's not the case. If you're paying $1,000 for a personal tax return, you can never expect to have planning included in that. But that's what CPAs think that their clients think. And so they're afraid to charge when their clients come to them with questions. And so, in the same thing on the advisor side, advisors aren't doing it because they don't know it. They're not, in tune with that, or they got to get stuck in their own lanes of saying, this is the only strategy I know, so this is the only strategy that I'm going to push. And, I just got off a phone call with somebody that we talked about this exact topic. And I said, the power behind a financial advisor or a tax strategist is that you can look independently at so many different opportunities, so many different strategies where you're not just stuck in one lane. If you talk to someone that says, hey, I think you should invest in oil and gas, and that's the best tax strategy out there, and the only thing that person sells is oil and gas investments, everyone that comes to their plate, they're going to say oil and gas is the best tax strategy out there. But as a tax strategist, we're not tied to any specific platform, any specific strategy. And there's power behind that because we can look at a holistic picture of what's available and do vetting and weed out those strategies or weed out those concepts that just don't feel right.
Yeah, it's funny, and I promise this ties into what you just said. Bear with me for a second. If I were to sneeze right now, you guys would say something that commonly is said when you hear someone sneeze. What would that be?
God bless you.
God bless you. Yeah. Have you ever thought about why? And I know why, because I went to that bastion of truth, which is the internet, and I Googled it. And on it, there's kind of three primary reasons that we do it. And one is it used to be a sign of like warding off evil spirits. Because if you were sneeze, it was a sign you might be coming down with something, you might be getting sick. And so it was like a sign of well-wishing. So bless you, God bless you. I hope things go well with you. Then there's this this idea of, well, if I want to not ward off evil spirits, but I feel like a guttural, I should say something to acknowledge it. So it's like an acknowledgement, kind of like, how you doing? Doing great. People don't necessarily think about what they're saying. But the most popular reason, hands down, is we inherited that response, right? We inherited it from just a culture, society, our parents. And I think when it comes to like the traditional idea of, let's say, a CPA model or even a financial advisor, is they all inherited a model. And that model didn't include proactive tax planning. It was, in the CPA world, it was tax preparation, right? In the financial advisor world, it's, well, we do these asset management or protection planning, and maybe both. And proactive tax planning, to your point, the other thing I think in that same model that we inherited is that when they inherited that tax preparation model, there's this kind of underlying theme with, we're paid for the hours we work. And so if it takes me this long to do a return, I've done this, and that's what I bill. And so whereas our philosophy and what we believe everybody should kind of turn that on its head is you're paid for the value you bring, not the hours you work, not a labor model, right? So love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love the idea behind that too, because, as a consumer, do I want to pay somebody for the hours? And even if you say, if I'm talking to you, Wes, and you're like, Mike, I can take your investments and I can get you a 50% return, and it's going to take me an hour to do it. Am I willing to pay you for what would be
Yeah.
500 hours worth of time? Yes, because you're going to give me 50% returns and you can guarantee it. Like, I don't care how much time you spend on that. I'm going down that route. Whereas if somebody said, Mike, I can manage your financials for you, and I'm just going to charge you by the hour. It's going to be 3 hours worth of work. Okay, but they're going to get me a 2% return, or maybe a minus 2% return. Like, would I pay for value over just getting the work done? Absolutely. And I think that the problem that we have is, and believe me, I've went down this path before. I started in that hourly billing concept because that's what I knew. When I started, I never worked for an accounting firm before starting an accounting firm, which I say is good because I don't bring that baggage of experience, but it's also bad because I have to try and fail all these different things to make it work because I don't know what I don't know. But I brought some of that concepts to it, and it was hard for me to flip that switch and say, how do we value a price based on that value we bring? But it's not only a benefit for you as the advisor, as the consultant, as a CPA, whatever role you might be, but it also is a benefit for the person that you're serving as well. Because if you go to a CPA that charges hourly, if you go to a financial advisor that charges hourly, and then you go next year to one that charges on a value-based pricing, I can guarantee your results are going to be significantly better. Your experience is going to be significantly better with that person that charged based on a value-based pricing. And even though the price was more, your results are going to magnify that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a guy named Garrett Gunderson. I don't know if you know Garrett. He's been on our show before, and he wrote some great books. But one of the things he says all the time when it comes to this idea of value is money follows value creation. It doesn't follow hard work, and it doesn't follow long hours. You might have to work hard, and you might have to work long hours in order to learn how to create your value, but it follows value creation. And I think there's an inherited idea, a labor mentality, that if I work a long time, I should be paid more, versus that shift of how do I just deliver more value? And Justin, I'm curious for you, because you've lived in a lot of different worlds in the financial space. Your thoughts as you went through the traditional model, kind of that partner role, and then over to us, the shift that you saw take place when it comes to the difference between those two things.
Yeah, it's interesting as far as the topic standpoint, because a lot of the people that we teach through learning series and on that side of the business, but even on the advisory direct for our clients on that, in that regard as well, you see a lot of this. And going back to what I did in the military, there was a difference in terms of value creation. If I was in the infantry versus going into special forces, one, you get a reduction in terms of force capability. So you've got to dramatically increase efficiency of what you're creating. But because of that, there's a ton of different support and availability. And then getting to kind of see what you mentioned on the partner side, to see how the sausage was made, decided that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to keep doing. I didn't want to keep eating that sausage. So switching over and then coming over here, joining up and starting actually doing the fee-based planning, it was just a breath of fresh air in terms of a confirmation of how I wanted to do business, right? Like, how do I not have to constantly go chasing and create enough value to where people are looking for it? And it's the value that people are looking for, not just something that I find valuable. Because I can cook a pretty good hamburger, but I'm not McDonald's now serving 9 billion or whatever it is, right? So there's two layers to that.
But I'd rather eat your hamburger.
I just need to do better marketing.
And I think, one thing to think about that concept is that, when you value-based pricing, sure, what you're providing might not take you as long as what you're charging for. So let's say you value someone at $4,000 and it takes you an hour. Are you really worth that $4,000 an hour? But one thing I want to think about there is that the amount of time and effort and learning and experiences that you have that led to that there's a lot of hours actually wrapped into that. So even though it only took you 1 hour that one time, you have so much experience that's gone into that 1 hour is actually a lot more of unpaid, time that you're doing all this learning, you're doing all these experiencing all these experiences that you weren't getting paid for. Now you're in a way getting paid for that, even though it's many years beyond the fact.
Right. It's kind of like that old story of the guy, the factory owner calls him, the repairman to come in. He said, the whole line's shut down and we're losing it, hundreds of thousands of dollars if this stays this way very long. And the guy comes in and he spends about, call it 3 minutes, and looks around, looks at everything, goes over and turns a screw a half a turn. And then he says, okay, I'll send you a bill. So he sends him a bill for $50,000. And the owner calls the guy and he's like, hey, what, can you send me itemization of this? Well, how did you get to this point? And he said, sure. And so he had on there like gas to the facility, X amount of money, screwdriver, X amount of money, turning the screw, X amount of money. It was all really small stuff. And then the last item was knowing which screw to turn. And it was like $49,000.
Yeah.
And that's the reality is, hey, the value-based economy. And we want people that recognize and want us on the team because of the value we deliver. Another thing I'd like to talk about on this topic of why, specifically in the financial advisory space, that people don't do it, is I think a big thing that I've observed is people tend to put tax planning in this, what I'll call their hard pile. They're going, well, that's so difficult to understand. And there's 77,000 pages, depending on the font size of the tax code. And boy, it just take me forever to do that, which is why I think, and we talk about your podcast all the time, it really isn't that hard to get better than 99% of the world out there when it comes to tax knowledge, if you give it a little bit of time every single week, and then you practice it. So love to hear you speak on your thoughts there.
Yeah, and when we talk about tax strategy, we kind of break strategies up into two different buckets. We have what we call core tax strategies. These are strategies available to anyone, any size, wherever they are. And then we have what we call advanced tax strategies. Advanced tax strategies typically going to be reserved for those earning a higher income, usually $250,000, $300,000 or more in household income. And I would say from a core tax strategy, these are strategies that everybody should be implementing. If I ever have a high net worth individual that comes to me and says, I just want to look at advanced, I say, no. The first thing we do is we knock out the core strategies because they have a huge impact on you and also help with that mindset shift as a business owner. And so those core tax strategies are not complex. They're easy to understand, easy to implement. You just have to spend the time to learn them. And then not only learn them, but understand what that correct implementation is. And I always say correct implementation because I talk about a way that you can take a strategy. You can learn everything you want, but if you don't implement, you don't get tax savings. If you don't implement correctly, it means that you might not be doing it legally. And so with all tax strategies, it's just learning the strategy, fairly easy. Take the time, take steps into it, and then how do we correctly implement that? And when I look at core tax strategies, the concept behind what we want small business owners, advisors to know is just take it slow, because there is this core concept that most of these strategies lead from. And it's what I call maximizing deductions, or after tax versus pre-tax dollars. And that's how do we take money that we're already spending and how do we turn it into a business expense? Not how do we go out and buy things we don't need and those types of things, but how do we take money that we're going to spend anyways and turn it into a business expense? And if we can understand that core concept, that concept leads to so many different strategies down the road, whether it's home office deduction, whether it's automobile, whether it's hiring our kids, whether it's the Augusta bill, whatever strategy it might be, it's all taking that similar concept of moving after tax spending into pre-tax spending, and how do we best optimize that? And so, I always say take it slow. Start to learn one strategy at a time, understand that core concept, and start to plan out how that fits back to that initial one. Obviously, implementing these strategies on your own is super powerful too, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of strategies that I look at that I will say, I won't touch that strategy unless I do it myself. And if I do it myself and I get comfortable and I get good at it, then I'll go talk to other people about it. And so that's, that putting it in the boots on the ground, putting in that practice can also help as well.
Yeah, I think it's so critical to just remove this idea that this is like you have to go to college and spend 4 years to become become competent to be able to understand this, because again, you're going to want to implement it yourself. All of you listening own businesses, you're entrepreneurs yourself. And these strategies, you need to know them for you first and foremost. And then because you know them for you, it's easier to see them when you're having these conversations with clients. Our clients, the number one thing most of them have as a concern is they want to optimize their family income. And they get really good at earning income, but their tax acumen stays what it was when they had their first part-time job, and taxes weren't a big part of it. And so one refreshing thing that advisors can bring to the table, because we need to learn the whole story of what's going on in this client's life, is to say, hey, let me just share with you this. You want to optimize your income. You're doing a good job creating income. And there's some really easy legal ways that you can keep a lot more of it, because one of the single largest expenses of most of the kind of clients we work with when they meet us is going to be the tax system. And there's so much of that money is unnecessarily, we're not talking about crazy stuff. We're talking about just basic stuff that's unnecessarily causing more money to unnecessarily go away to the IRS and not back to their own retained earnings. So if you are like, if you were going to, variety of advisors listening, some people are doing this stuff. Some people are they haven't even touched it. And so they're getting this, they're kind of getting, maybe I should investigate this. What are some steps that they can begin to take to kind of get, one, initially tax intelligent, but then continuing to develop that knowledge base to higher and higher levels?
Yeah, I think it's finding your trusted source, right? That's the first step, is what is going to be your trusted source that you're going to look at for a lot of this information. Because guess what? You can go on TikTok and you can find all sorts of tax strategy out there, but that only just confuses things worse, or they're making, it's all a fluff show. And that was one thing when we started our podcast, is we don't want this to be fluff. We don't want to say, hey, everyone should go out and hire their kids. It's a tax-free expense. Your kids pay no income taxes on it. You can send them $15,000 a year, no problem. And then end of the story. That's not the end of the story. That's an overall concept. Yes, all that is true, but there's so many things that have to be put in place to make that happen, and to make that an actual reality. It might not be 15,000, it might be 5,000, it might be 2,000. We don't know, but we have to look at these concepts as not just a fluff piece, but let's understand the core root of them. And so that was always our intention when we started a podcast, is how do we not make fluff pieces? How do we talk about the core concept of a strategy, and then talk about how we actually do that, what needs to be done correctly? Because Wes, one thing in my research that I found when looking at tax strategy is that so many people, you ask about tax strategy, and the CPA, the advisor will say, well, I can't advise on that because it really depends. Everyone's situation is differently. And I got so sick of hearing that answer, and I started to research it. And that's really what led me down this tax path. But one thing that I realized there is that, yes, every person is going to implement a strategy a little bit differently, and your specific situation does matter. It does depend. But 90% of a tax strategy, it's the same for everybody. 90% of what the strategy is, how do you do it correctly, what documents do you need to put in place to dot your I's and cross your T's, is the same for everybody. Now you tweak it, that last 10%, based on your situation. And so if we look at hiring our kids, how we hire our kids is the same for everybody. But Wes, if you have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, and I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, we're going to hire our kids a little bit differently. Yeah. Or if you're a financial advisor and I'm a plumber, we're going to hire our kids a little bit differently, but the steps, the concept, and what we need to do to dot our I's and cross our T's is going to be exactly the same. And so my intentions on what we always want to do is, how do we get everybody to that 90% and then tweak it for that last 10% based on their actual client situation? Because so many business owners, they hear it depends. How do I do this? It depends. They walk the other way because they think it's too much work, not worth the effort. But if they can get 90% of the way there and then say, how do I do this, to their CPA or their financial advisor, now they only have a couple steps that they need to do, and they're already there. And so that's really kind of the piece there, is finding a trusted partner that, okay, I want to dig into the trainings, the content of that person.
Yeah. And you've certainly been a trusted partner for us and our team. Talk about some of the ways that people can work with you to kind of get to this place of tax intelligent and be able to help their clients with it.
Yeah, so a few things. One, I have a book that we just launched in January called the Small Business Tax Savings Handbook. A really good, what I call kind of back of the napkin, talks in depth about the strategies, is a really good kind of desktop reference guide. So I would say go check that out. The second piece is our podcast or YouTube channel, whichever you prefer to read, watch, or listen. Our podcast, our YouTube channel, and our blog are all going to be very similar content, and it's just how you prefer to listen to it. But that's all going to be free content. Again, when we're talking about the deep diving into these concepts, but we're not going to cover that last 10% just because we don't have enough time to cover every single situation, but we get the bulk of the concept out there. And then we have a software called TaxHelm. And TaxHelm, like I said, is meant to be that resource for small business owners to understand what strategies are available to them, walk them through implementation step by step. How do we correctly implement this specific strategy that produces the tax savings? And then within TaxHelm, we do unlimited access to our team of tax experts. We do an annual one-on-one Zoom consultation. We do webinars, all sorts of different things. We have a partner directory in there of different partners that we might refer them out to. So a lot of different opportunities in there. And that's if you want to take that tax strategy to the next level. So I would say first, if you're just dipping your toes in this, grab the book, listen to the podcast, start to get comfortable with this concept. And once you're like, okay, I want to deep dive into this, I want to be a true resource for my clients, jump into TaxHelm. And TaxHelm is meant for the business owner, not necessarily the advisor. And so what I would say as an advisor is you are a business owner. Jump in there, utilize it yourself. And then when you're ready to refer people to it, we have an affiliate program that you can get your clients in there. We're also in the current development of building an advisor portal where you can load your own clients in there, run these blueprints that create that tax plan, help with the implementation modules and all those different things. So those are kind of the process or steps that I'd recommend as far as working with us.
No, that's awesome, brother. Well, I deeply appreciate you being on the show as always. And guys, I would just say, listening today, this is a massive area of value creation for your clients and for yourself. And so take the time to do the things necessary to become more and more valuable. And what happens is the more valuable you become, the more people are attracted to that value-driven experience. And you're going to be swimming in a blue ocean rather than just coming and doing the same thing that the other person or the other 10 advisors that the client had met with in the past has done. They just want you on the team because you're so connected, you know so much, and you deliver so much value. So, brother, thank you. And look forward to, you have
just to jump on that, Wes, I had a conversation with someone the other day, a massively growing business doing super well. And I was talking to him and he's like, Mike, I honestly am not enjoying this because I feel like I'm putting in all this work to grow my business and I just pay more and more into taxes. Like I'm putting all this work, putting all this effort, doing all these great things, but my tax bill is eating away at everything. And so I had a conversation with him, like, look at the things that we can do by lowering that tax bill. And think of the power that you as a financial advisor have with that ability of saying, we're going to lower your tax bill. That business, where that business owner might be burnt out and ready to quit in a year from now, and all of his employees go away. Now that business owner is rejuvenated, got more money in his pocket, can grow that business even more than expected, all because he didn't understand tax planning and didn't touch tax planning. He just assumed whatever you make, you just pay a tax on. There's no strategy involved around it. And so there's a lot of power as the person in that seat that's advising that person that you have that can truly impact lives, impact businesses, impact communities. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, brother, that's what we're all about, increasing profitability and quality of life. So great conversation today, Mike. Look forward to having you back the next time.
Yeah, Wes, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to From Busy to Rich. If something in today's episode sparked an idea or hit a nerve, don't keep it to yourself. Follow the show, share it with a friend, and let's keep building a community of advisors who want more. You can find more resources, tools, and free content at wesyounglive.com. We'll see you back here next time for more real conversations about building the life and business you really want.